Good morning. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study. My name is Kurt Bell. I'm your host. Today we're going to be going over Genesis 35. This is, the name of this chapter is Jacob returns to Bethel. This is one of the several things that happens in this particular chapter. It's been a couple of days. I was, my wife was overseas last week, and I was borrowing her car. So, it turned out that was well, it worked out for a couple of videos, but just other things in life happened, and it wasn't a good week for it. Mainly it was stuff I was doing, fulfilling my playing the role of my wife in the family, which kind of my days are pretty filled as they are, but playing that role as well kind of filled them up. There really wasn't enough time left over to do this, but we're back on track. Let me check the bike out. It looks good, and we're ready to go. So let's catch up where we left off and continue on. I'm a little bit late for work, so I'm gonna have to ride a little fast. I'm wearing new gloves. Check that out. Got brand new gloves. These are I think they're deerskin gloves. Let's give them a try. I imagine it'll take some time for them to really wear in. So in Genesis 35, Jacob is going to move on again. A lot of moving on with the sons of Abraham and Abraham himself. In the last chapter, in 34, Jacob's two of his sons killed all the male inhabitants. I think the town was Shechem, where they had been living nearby. Remember that? They had the whole thing with the prince of Shechem's son raped Dinah, and who is Jacob's one daughter. And there was a complicated arrangement was made to give Dinah to the rapist to wed, but the house of Israel said, "We'll agree to this if you'll circumcise all the men of Shechem." I think it's Shechem, hopefully that's the right name of the city. And they said the men of Shechem agreed because they thought that by doing so they could marry with Jacob's family and then inherit all of Jacob's wealth, intermarry into Jacob's wealth. Basically, pretty nice long-term strategy, right? I mean, bring in this wealthy foreigner, have them marry into the village, and the village becomes that much more wealthy, right? Because otherwise, at any moment, Jacob could take all his flocks and cattle and wealth and go. So that all ended when that nice arrangement ended when, after all the men had been circumcised, 3 days later, two of Jacob's sons took their swords and went through the city and dispatched at the edge of the sword all of the males of the city. I'm assuming that meant all the boys and male babies as well as the men. So what happens now in Genesis 35 is that God comes down, well, we know in this chapter that he actually does speak like furniture at the side of the road. He does actually speak to Jacob, but we don't know if he's actually talking to him in person or what, or maybe in a dream at this point, but tells him to move on to Bethel, or Bethel. I think it's also going to be called El Bethel, which has the L adds some special meaning to or at Bethel, something like that. And so Jacob wakes up in the morning, or whatever it is, however that encounter unfolds. He goes to his people and he says, "All right, everybody, we're moving on. We're headed off to Bethel, but first we need to clean ourselves up. So I want you to change your clothes and take all of your foreign gods and earrings." We don't know if he's talking about the earrings of his people or the earrings in the gods. Maybe the little gods are wearing little earrings, and maybe people would say, "Wow, maybe I'll get rid of the god, but I'll take the earring and wear it for myself." So we don't know. And so, and that's not me talking. I read a little bit of scholarship that was indicating that there was some confusion in the scholarship along those lines. Now, the same scholarship said that the whole deal about the changing of the clothes was a symbolic thing, kind of like putting aside the past and getting ready for the future. And it also may have been a way to cleanse themselves of the contamination of their past sins. Maybe, for example, the sins of worshiping other gods, having little gods. Although maybe the gods hadn't been with them that long. Maybe the gods were part of the booty that they got from Shechem. when they raided after they killed all the males and took all the females, all the women and the girls into slavery. Maybe they took all the booty of the city. Maybe they also took all the little gods of Shechem. And so, and also the clothes. Maybe they were all smattered with blood. But it doesn't. No, that shouldn't be the case, because it was only 2 of the sons that did that, right? Apparently, all of the men of Shechem, men and boys of Shechem, were killed by two men. And the reason that they could do that so handily was because the men of Shechem were still laid up from the trauma of their circumcision. So anyway, that's all done, and he takes they collect up all of the gods and the earrings, and Jacob buries these under an oak tree. So that same scholarship that I read said that burying a god was a satisfactory and sufficient way to dispose of foreign gods. You didn't necessarily have to melt them down. I guess when you're melting them down, you just kind of still have the essence of that god. You wouldn't want to do that, so just bury it in, out of sight, out of mind, right? So that's what they did, and off they go. Now, as they're wandering through the land, they're a pretty easy target, right? I mean, they're all going together off to Bethel, which I think I read is about 20 miles from where they were at. I guess they weren't they were at Shechem, right? Which is, I guess, close to Beersheba. And along the way, God somehow puts the fear of God, of himself, puts the fear of God into all the people of the land, so that they don't come out to pursue Jacob and his entourage. They let them go through. Yet another instance of God, stepping in and helping out to make sure things go the way that he wants them to go. Begs the question of free will, although free will hasn't been mentioned at this point yet. And about midway there, I think, along the way, they have a problem where Rebekah's nurse, which I was a little confused. Rebekah's nurse? Rebekah's pretty old, right? Does that mean her nurse was one of the slaves that bore her son to Jacob? Or was that her nurse, like her when she was a young girl as well, who must be very old? Whoever this is, she dies. And she's named, but I can't remember the name. She dies, and Jacob buries her again under an oak tree. And apparently there's some interest in locating that, and apparently it's been hard to do, in terms of the scholarly and the investigation. That's because there's not a lot of clarity about exactly where that happened. So off they go again, and finally they get to Bethel, where, let me see if I can remember right, Jacob erects an altar of stone, kind of like what he did back in the day. Remember when he was first, long ago, first heading off to fleeing from Esau, and he came to that spot and used the stone as a pillow. This is many chapters back. Used the stone as a pillow, and then had a dream of God. Saw Jacob's. That's when he saw the ladder leading into heaven and the angels climbing and descending, or maybe it was a staircase, but whatever it was, we think of it as Jacob's ladder. That's where at that same place, Bethel, he then erects another pillar of stones and a little altar, and then anoints it with oil and some other fluid, and gives a blessing. I don't know if he offers a sacrifice. I don't think it says he offers a sacrifice, but he does a blessing at that point. That's what the whole thing was in coming there. And at that point, I think this is where God actually bodily comes down from heaven and tells him, his God's go-to thing with Abraham and his children, which is, I am the one Lord your God. I will bless you and make your descendants as the sands of the sea and the dust of the earth and the stars in the sky. It's a well-worn thing. I mean, Jacob's heard it a couple of times from God. Isaac certainly heard that a number of times. Abraham, went on, and none of that really came. So far, Abraham is just Abraham's dead, but Abraham barely saw the start of that in his lifetime, given that God didn't grant any children until he was quite old. So, I'm sure I've kind of pictured Jacob, because I'm sure he's heard this from his father, maybe before him, about we've got this God in our family that shows up periodically and will actually bodily appear, and he's pretty powerful. I recommend you listen. He's probably going to tell you that he's going to bless you and make you make a lot of children. But you know, take that with a grain of salt. You know, we haven't really. He's been told that to Grandpa too. And look at us. There's not very many of us. So I picture kind of Jacob sitting there at Bethel. He's anointed the rocks with oil. God appears, starts into his spiel. Jacob's probably kind of like, you know, checking his fingernails, you know, and looking around, you know, what's for dinner, you know. Let God get through his thing. And then God lights back up to heaven, and doesn't that look like a black cab? Kind of. It's one of those newer taxi cabs. Kind of reminds me of the black cabs that I used to see in England and ride in London. What kind of car is that? Something. I've seen these before. They're not just used for cabs, but they're a very nice car. So there you go. And then at that point, what happens next? There's a few more things. We hear about the number of... No, at this point, Reuben, one of Jacob's sons, takes it upon himself to sleep with one of Jacob's concubines, and Jacob hears about it. Now Jacob apparently doesn't do anything about it, and interesting, I did read some more history, the same historical source on that, the same scholarship that I was reading before, said that the concubines, these women, were treated like property, so that they would pass, excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze, maybe not. They would pass like inheritance from father to son. And so that in doing this was not so much even though it might be considered a somewhat incestuous event, although the concubine probably isn't his mother. It's just, you know, kind of, you know, lots of ick associated with this. It was probably more of a political move, kind of like, you know, setting the stage for usurping the power from Israel, who is not long for the, you know, who is Jacob, who is Israel. Oh, I forgot about that part. At the end of Jacob's talk with God up there with the rocks, you know, after God finished his soliloquy, he reminded Jacob that, you know, your name is, he said, what is your name, Jacob? Yeah, no longer you're Israel. And which kind of confused me, because Jacob was told this by God a long time ago, and Jacob never really adopted. I was confused about why God called Jacob Israel, you know, many chapters back, but nobody ever adopted the name. Yet, when God told Abraham, you are henceforth, when he told Abram, you are henceforth to be called Abraham, the whole narrative changed, and Abram was now Abraham. But that didn't happen. But now it will. He will be Israel for another 2 paragraphs, because he's going to die. So the Reuben is setting the stage for taking over maybe taking over the mantle of the house, or maybe it's just that he's doing so for the sake of his mother Leah. So, you know, it might be a very clever move, you know, so kind of positioning his mom to take over as the head woman, because we also know in another chapter that that Rachel is about to die as well. So next, and I might be getting things a little bit out of order. So Reuben sleeps with Jacob's concubine, possibly setting up his mother Leah to be the head woman. And at that point, Rachel is in hard labor with another son, her last son. And just before she dies, the nurse tells her, but, you know, you are blessed with another boy. And Rachel names him Ben something or other. And then immediately as she dies, that after, and Jacob says, nah, Ben, whatever the heck, let's just call him Benjamin. So he names her something. He names the boy something different. And now Rachel is dead. The nurse, her nurse had already died. Reuben has slept with Jacob's concubine, setting the stage for power for Leah, who is now with Rachel out of the picture. Leah is now ostensibly the head wife, right? Well, she is the only one. She is the only wife, right? Because there's the wives, there's the slave girls, and the concubines, and so she is. Now at this point, I think it's in very short order. Do they travel someplace else, or I think that's it? But Jacob dies next. Oh, no. There is something else. They do travel. Then they travel all the way back to Isaac, who I thought was long dead. And I was like, kind of when I got that, when I read Isaac's names, I was like, wait a minute. I assumed Isaac was long dead. Because he's, Jacob's come all the way back and ran into Esau, and Esau didn't say anything about his dad, and but apparently Isaac is still alive, and Jacob goes and sees him, and Isaac now is in his 80 something year. He's really old, and he which, how can he be 180? Didn't God say way back in Noah that man's years should be numbered no more than 125? Yet repeatedly after repeatedly, we see men and women living well past 125. What's up with that? So anyway, so now Isaac is dead, and as soon as Isaac dies, I think does Jacob die? Now I'm confused. Now I don't remember. Maybe I was confusing Isaac's death with Jacob's death. I think it ends there. I think Jacob is still alive. I was wrong before. Isaac is dead. But now, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That sets it up for the politics, for the succession. So we'll see what happens. Isaac's got a brand new baby son by Benjamin, and he's got 12 other sons. Oh, right in there, mixed in there is a listing of of Jacob's 12 sons, right? Cue the My Three Sons music and the feet. Do, 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 whatever that music was like. Whoa, fire truck sticking out. Wow. Wow, don't you think they should have their fire truck lights on? Wow. That's scary. Anyway, that's it. So now we have I think we're ready to move on to the next chapter. There's a lot in there, and I'm kind of surprised myself that it flowed as good as it did, because I had a hard time with this chapter. This wasn't an easy one. Oh, by the way, footnote, this was the first, to my memory, this is the first time that in the Bible I've encountered the word soul, and it was used with regard to Rachel when she died, and it said her soul, I think it said her soul went up to heaven, or her soul left her body, or something like that. But unfortunately there was no definition of term, no definition of just what a soul is. So we're left to, I guess we're left to kind of imagine that for ourselves. But thank you for joining me for another episode of Freeway Bible Study. Tomorrow, Genesis 36. We'll see what happens with the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.